here. Okay, now, so we start off with the iron and brass of a bunch of verses. There's quite a few verses that refer to the iron and brass. And so I want to read a few and kind of see if we can get the understanding of what the iron and brass may represent. Genesis 4:22. One of these throwaway verses, Genesis 4:22. This is the first one that's mentioned.
A lot of those names I can't pronounce, but I'll read it. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, the forger of every cutting instrument of brass and iron, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. That was crazy.
That
I
was
just
good.
had flashbacks back to first grade.
Sister Tuna.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Yo.
So here we find that it makes mention of Tubal-Cain, who's the forger of every cutting instrument of brass and iron. I can say, okay, cutting instrument. All right, well, I don't understand it, but we just found a tree that was cut down. And here's a cutting instrument made mention of brass and iron. That's weird. Okay, so let's move on to Leviticus 26:18 through 20. Leviticus 26:18 through 20.
Bible study. Leviticus 18.
26.
26.
20.
Yeah.
Wait, 26:18 or 18:26?
26:18.
26, chapter 26,
Okay.
verse 18.
All right, I'll read it.
Hmm.
If after all this, am I in the right place?
Yes.
Yeah.
If after all this you will not listen to me, I will punish you for your sins 7 times over. I will break down your stubborn pride and make the sky above you like iron and the ground beneath you like bronze. Your strength will be spent in vain because your soil will not yield its crops, nor will the trees of your land yield their fruit. Continue.
No, that's good. Although it continues on with the continued judgment, but here 7 times more. Break the pride. Your heaven is iron, earth is brass. Neither shall the trees yield their fruit. And in the previous verse, we see the forger of every cutting instrument of brass and iron was Tubal-Cain.
And wait, and also mentioned 7 times. And
Yeah,
now it mentions 7 times in Leviticus.
right. And there's a connection between the brass and the iron versus these other random verses that are seemingly don't mean anything until you're saying, hey, wait a second. I wonder if there's a relationship between the brass and iron and the cutting instrument. And then the next instance of pride. And by the way, in this particular passage in Leviticus, God's not talking to the heathen. He's talking to
Right.
his
Israel.
his wayward people.
Right.
And there's,
Looking at Israel,
yeah.
who
So
were quote, the church back then.
right.
Mhm.
So one of the other things, in one of the next passages, which I'm not going to read, is in Deuteronomy, which pretty much says, not exactly word for word, but it says kind of the same thing as here. But this is pretty black and white, even going as far as the 7 times and the pride and the brass iron and the trees which don't yield fruit. Well, in this case, because the tree is laying in the dust or laying in the dirt. Of the grass, and it's been cut out. But next verse, Job 41:27.
Poor Job. Job 41.
27. And I think this is God talking here in response to Job's and all his
Oh,
friends
yeah.
blabbing away.
Iron it treats like
Yeah.
straw and bronze like rotten wood.
Hmm.
Okay, so I know this again, another throwaway verse, except of course, a passage I was reading with some guys yesterday and that we'll read in a minute. But here, for some reason, there's a correlation to iron being straw and brass is, here it's called rotten wood, but brass is like a form of wood. So straw, wood, iron, brass. Okay, now we'll look to that relationship in just a second, but let's do Jeremiah 6:28.
I got it. They are all hardened rebels going about to slander. They are bronze and iron. They all act corruptly.
So another example of the crappy way bronze and iron seemingly, again, I think he's talking about his people here, his wayward people, as Jeremiah is always talking about his wayward people. But he's referring to as slanderers, brass and iron, and they're dealing corruptly. Now, the last verse we're going to read is 1 Corinthians 3, verses 12 through 15. And we're going to look for that relationship of the iron as straw and the brass as rotten wood.
What was the verse?
1 Corinthians 3, 12 through 15.
I have it. You want me to read it?
Sure.
If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work.
The next two verses too.
Oh, I'm sorry. The work will be shown. I'm sorry. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames.
Okay, so this passage, and we were reading this last night, and I was trying to.
Kind of confusing.
It is. These four verses are Paul talking about the foundation of Jesus. He's saying, if you build on the foundation of Jesus, and he doesn't clarify what's good or bad, but if you look at verse 12, he says gold, silver, costly stones. And now we would say they're probably good, right?
Yeah.
Wood, hay, and stubble, or wood, hay, and straw, I think is the version that you have, Meg, that you read.
Yeah.
They, and of course, in the midst of fire, what would happen to them?
Burn up.
Right. And so in verse 13 here, each man's work is made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it is revealed in fire. Okay, now, which day are we talking about here?
Is that Judgment Day?
Yeah, I think Judgment Day would also be which day that we've referred to.
Day of the Lord.
Yeah, but which day of which number day?
Seven.
Would be 7. All right, now in Malachi, it describes as the Lord suddenly coming to his temple and coming as fire and as a pure fire of silver and gold, I think he says in that passage, but he also makes reference as being like he cleanses things like a fuller soap. And that happens seemingly on day 7. We've read that passage in Malachi 3, or it might be 3 and 4. But Paul's making reference here. And one of the things that it stood out to me as we're reading Babylon, and there's shadows all over the Bible of Babylon, and in Revelation, it refers to the wayward people of God as Babylon, but it makes mention of the brass and the iron, which quite frankly, it's not really told what that even means. But what it suggests when we put these passages in sequence, it means somehow God's wayward people are, I think, typified in verse 12 as the wood and the stubble, or the wood and the straw, like Nebuchadnezzar was. So he, as Paul's talking about here, is having to go through fire on day 7. And again, we were debating it last night. What does that mean? Like, what fire? And what if you didn't live on day 7? Would you be in the fire? Like, would you be just in heaven watching this? Or are you coming with Jesus on day 7? What does this even mean? We didn't come to any conclusion, but it does mean or suggest, if any man's work abide, he shall receive a reward. And if his work shall be burned, like the brass, the straw, or the iron, and
Stones,
not the stones, the
the
iron.
gold,
No, the wood.
the wood.
Or maybe
Okay.
I'd have them reversed.
The who does that sound like?
Papa,
Dad.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I don't mean that against you.
So,
It just reminded me.
so the question is, Paul's talking about works being burned, but in verse 15, you shall suffer loss, but you shall be saved, yet as though through fire. Well, Nebuchadnezzar seemingly is a straw, and what's the other one? The wood that had to be toppled. That would be an example of his fire.
Right.
And although God didn't seemingly completely destroy him, he still had a plan, even if, of course, he only lived 1 additional year, but he did have a plan. So what's hidden and typified? Well, what does the wood and the straw, or the iron and the brass, seem to represent? Was something that's gone wayward, that was good at one time, but then is seemingly toppled, that God seems to throw all these little symbols in there, using all these various Old Testament passages to throw in almost a, but I can still use you, or I still have, you may come out of it just with the clothes on your back, because everything you built has no value to me, almost like Nebuchadnezzar, because I'll put it down. But eventually, as you go through the fire, and whatever this day 7 process that Paul's talking about, he still has intention in some regard. God will still say, well, somehow you still make it, you still shall be saved as yet through fire. Well, that's kind of what happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He had to be totally humbled. That would be his fire. And then he comes out and God still says, okay, well, I didn't destroy it forever.
yeah.
Right.
So there is significance to the brass and the iron, and it's deep. But let's not linger there. So we'll go back and finish the last 3 verses or 4 verses of Daniel 34, 37. 4:34 through 37.
34 through, I'll read it. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, or Nebi, as I like to call myself, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I prayed the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, what have you done? At the same time that my Sanity was restored, my honor and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble.
You know, honestly, it's probably good that he died at that point.
Yeah, very true.
Because like all of us, you go back, you backslide and go on other areas, right?
So he wrote this whole chapter.
I think thought is that he did, but maybe in help with Daniel or something like that.
Oh,
Because he does say in the beginning, I, Nebuchadnezzar, he starts out the chapter with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there a change in Nebuchadnezzar?
Seemingly, yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, he lifts his eyes towards heaven, his understanding returns. He says, I bless, praise, and honor the Most High. Dominion is everlasting, and the kingdoms from generation to generation. Now, this means probably absolutely nothing, but as I read verse 34, and he does say, his dominion's everlasting and his kingdom from generation to generation. I knew that in Daniel, early part of this chapter, the same type of statement is made in verse 3. So if you look back at verse 3, he says the same thing, but he says it backwards. So in verse 3, my Bible says, he says, instead of saying dominion is everlasting, he says his kingdom is everlasting. And he says, instead of saying kingdom from generation to generation, he says his dominion.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
So you see that? Now, I have no
Yeah.
idea why that would be, but I wonder, is that supposed to mean something? Why it would be opposite?
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
Because I know from my perspective, I couldn't tell you what the difference would be between either one, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because
Does it mean anything different? Because I don't know.
they're the same words in like what language did I say this was? This is like in Hebrew, but it's really in Aramaic or something like that, whatever
Yeah.
language they spoke. And the words that Hebrew interpreted from this are the same ones from 3. They're just put in a different order.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, they're
So
the
we
same.
don't know if it's different.
It's just it's like a puzzle piece that's just been moved and said, I think this piece actually goes with this and the other one goes here. So they've switched to 2 meanings. But
no, he uses kingdom, he describes kingdom as eternal in the top and dominion as eternal in the bottom.
Right.
right.
Is
So he
dominion-
switches the adjectives describing dominion and kingdom.
is
Right.
it dominion a kingdom?
Yeah, what's the difference between those two words?
I could tell you what dominion means. Dominion is empire.
Okay.
His kingdom is kingly realm or his reign,
Oh,
whatever. Again, I don't know if that clears, it probably doesn't clear anything up, but that's just out of the concordance.
huh.
So
Hmm.
the inhabitants of the earth, there is nothing, this is what he learns. There is nothing to him. He's the big boss on earth. And in the armies of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, no one hinders him or says, what are you doing? And then we mentioned this a minute ago, more greatness added to Nebuchadnezzar at the end than the beginning. And in 37, he says he praises and extols the honor of the God of heaven, for all his works are truth and his ways justice. And to those who walk in pride, he's able to humble.
Don't you wonder how they knew his sanity came back?
Well, if he wrote this with somebody's help, then he's just writing like an autobiographical account of it.
Yeah, but how would they know? Like he,
I mean, how would the people start coming to him and
yeah,
say,
like
oh,
his
thank God you're back?
advisors, why would they come to him? Like,
Maybe
how would they
saw a
know?
change in him.
Yeah,
They
well,
had him in a cage in the field. Oh, just kidding.
they watched him day and night.
You were like, let's wait for
Stop
him to
eating
come back to
grass,
us.
it's bad for you.
Daniel said it 7 times. So let's see, what year are we in? 6. Next year, you're gonna be back.
This is what I read that was interesting out of the commentary. Somebody named Baldwin. He notes that information concerning Nebuchadnezzar's last 30 years is sparse. No record of the king's illness has been found in the Babylonian annals, yet such a humiliating experience certainly would have been omitted from official accounts. For corroboration of the illness can hardly be expected from archaeology, for royal families do not leave memorials of such frailties.
Yeah,
Mm.
I read that too. I read that they would never record this as part of the historical document. I mean, it was an insult. You ignored the bad stuff, kind of
Right.
like we do today.
Yes.
Let's not talk about Aunt so-and-so. She was a little crazy. Wait,
Right.
let's talk about her because we're prideful.
That's true too. Okay, the bigger picture. What are your thoughts or meanings of
If
this
we
whole
take
passage?
Nebby out of there and put ourselves in, it's
Okay.
scary. You have to constantly be diligent about your pride. You have to constantly be checking yourself at the door. It's scary
Yeah.
because that could be could definitely be me.
Me too.
I don't like my hair to grow like wings.
I think it's an example of God's New Testament people. I said this earlier, who sees the Son of Man in the previous chapter, think they reign on earth, and God humbles them in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
It could be, I said last week, I wonder if that one verse in Daniel 4:12 is where it talks about them all not flesh. One was all people eat from it, and then it says all flesh was fed from it. And I know God's God talks about flesh. He always is, especially in the New Testament, flesh is not good, spirit is good. And whether that's a reference to
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Babylon may be fleshly in that regard. And any other examples that you think or can remember trees being used in parables by Jesus?
No, but when you said tree, I thought of Zacchaeus. Now I had to climb in a tree.
Yeah,
That's the first thing I thought of. And then the tree that you already talked about, the one that Jesus gets mad at and curses.
Oh,
Okay.
and then there's the tree Jesus uses in his parable, the seed that man takes and puts in his own garden.
yeah.
Or how about just the
I
tree
never even thought of it that way, but now that's all I think about when I,
the tree of good and evil in the garden?
oh yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we said this, Babylon is spoken in Revelation 18 as fallen, like a
Right.
tree, like a
Oh
tree.
yeah.
Am I, anything else you guys can think about the tree? How about the nation we live in?
How about what?
The nation we live in.
No, Lord.
America. Oh my
How-
gosh.
It's just,
Just as
What?
far as pride and arrogance and
Ah,
everything else under the sun, that's all.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know, yeah, so, yeah, we certainly are there.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Wait, I had two questions. One, What, did you ever read the books of the Bible that were taken out of the Bible?
Do you know which ones they were?
Thomas,
What
the
is it?
book of Thomas. There's another one too that I've heard of. I've never read
Oh.
them, but
They were taken out or were they were just
Yeah.
never part of it?
No, they were like removed. I guess I don't know why.
I never heard
I
that.
just, I didn't know anything about them. But I
Did
know
you
you
ever hear
guys,
that there?
Yeah, there's a lot of text. A matter of fact, I could be wrong, but I think even in Jude 1:14, he refers to Enoch. And there's
yeah, the book of Enoch.
there's a book of Enoch. I think there's been questions of whether some of those should be included. I don't really know. I've never really.
okay.
I think some of those books, like I think Enoch sheds light on like some things from the Old Testament, like Noah and stuff like that. That's it, quite frankly, it's interesting because he fills in a lot of the details, but I've never actually read it, but I've heard people referring to it or read
Yeah.
it.
Where can you find it to read it?
And
Amazon.
I just Googled it and some guy
Amazon.
said, why were the books removed? And the answer was basically because their content didn't present Christianity or aspects of it in the way that the then leader of the Christian religion wanted it portrayed. In other words, it went a bit like, I don't agree with that. Let's remove it.
They had a council that got together at that one time
Yeah. and
that
voted it
decided
out.
all the books that were going to go into the Bible.
I just didn't know if any of you guys had looked into it because I'm like, I'm 2 years in still trying to get through the Bible. I went through the whole Old New Testament and now I'm into the Old and I'm into Judges. And then I don't know, I was like reading and then all of a sudden I was like, I thought I remember somebody saying something about books of the Bible coming out. And I was just curious if you guys had ever read them.
Mm-mm.
Enoch, Thomas,
Right.
Mary, and Judas.
Judas.
Is that right?
I know I've heard of all of them, but I've never read any of them.
I've never heard of
Okay.
Mary. The Book of Mary?
I don't know.
I never
I'm
heard
just
that.
what it says. I don't know if that's true or not.
And then what was the other thing? Oh, I was reading, what was I reading about today? Deborah, was it Deborah, the judge?
Mm-hmm.
She was one of the judge, or she was, and there were so many different things in it that I was like, that's got to be a symbolism. But I mean, because a lot of it was kind of like, or maybe you guys would understand it more, but when I was reading it, I was like, what does that have to do with anything?
She was the prophetess or something like that.
She's a judge, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was, yeah.
She was,
I was meant to judge people. See,
That's why you're judgy.
that's why I'm judgy.
Oh, come on, Nebby.
yeah, there's so much in there, Meg. It's really, and there's so many like parables upon parables upon parables. It's hard to, sometimes sometimes you see one and then it ends and then you're like, well, where does it end? And it's like taking a picture and saying, where's the snapshot end and how far should I go with the parable here?
Yeah.
All of it's all in there, but it's, I feel like the Holy Spirit shows you those things.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting.
I want to share a dream that I have. I may have shared this with you guys, and this goes back to 2011. And this was about a dream that I had when we were in vacation one year in, I think it was a timeshare in Florida. It was just a random dream in the midst of what was a fun vacation, a great weather, and all this in the midst of it, I had this dream. We have 10 minutes left. And
Okay.
this isn't anything more than a dream that I had of a tree. And this is the dream.
Tree.
This was
Okay.
a tree. This was a dream that I had, a short dream. I wrote it down and I looked for it physically in my journals this past week, and I couldn't find it, but I had made reference to it in another place. And I think because I was on vacation, I had handwritten it down on just a little tablet because it was so vivid. But it's a dream's real short. And it was a dream that I was driving past or looking at a house in Haddon Heights. I used to work in Haddon Heights. There was a tree in the yard, and I watched as this little short being in my dream, I thought it to be an angel. And this happened really fast. It was one of those real thick oak trees like they have in Haddon Heights or Haddonfield or that
Right.
area. And this little being had what appeared to be a chainsaw, and he was cutting through the tree like butter. Like he was zoom,
Oh, wow.
zoom, zoom, and cutting these sections out as if it was a warm stick of butter that was standing upright. And I was like, uh-oh. And so I had that dream, and quite frankly, it kind of freaked me out because I felt it to be a warning as to what was coming. Now, I would say that it's exactly what happened. It didn't just happen to me. It wasn't, I never thought it was a personal thing that was necessarily me, but I did feel as if it was very symbolic, and I knew what it was saying, but I couldn't, I have as much or as little pride as anybody else, but I didn't go around necessarily feeling like it was a pride thing. It was more like a picture of what I thought it to be, because I watched other people be tossed out the door before me. And I watched this picture and thought, oh no, and that was really weird because that's not what I pictured an angel to necessarily have the ability to do, cut a tree down. But it was as if it were saying, yeah, I'm getting ready to let the Haddon Heights tree be just cut to ribbons. And it was a warning. And if anything, it was like I was like a bird in the branches, or a beast under the tree, under the tree that was being told you're going to have to scatter or something like that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
But I did. It was very plain, and to me, I knew what he was referring to because I had read, that passage within the last few years of that particular instance.
Wow. Did you know that then? You said in 2012 or later when you were reading about?
No, I knew it before. I had read it before, but I had a bunch of dreams at the time that were almost a warning. Let me give you another one. Was the simple dream of, if you ever had a dream in the elevator, free falls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how it was. And I woke up. So there wasn't a bottom to it. And I was like, oh no, if only I could stay awake, eventually would have come to a halt. It never was. And this was kind of the same thing. There was no end. Sorry, the tree's going to be cut down, and it's part of the process. It was like,
Wow.
and there were other ones too. I wrote them all down, and I was like, quite frankly, it was scary because
Of course it was. Absolutely.
I was
So
watching.
he was chopping down a big tree in Haddon Heights, right? Was it on the White Horse Pike, and did it have the HPAE sign out in front?
Oh, so those big trees.
Oh yeah, that's where my office is.
No, it was on like First Avenue, where there's like a division street. I think it was on First Avenue. I was just sort of either going right back past the back of the school, or it was a street behind that, which is almost a dividing street between Haddon Heights and Haddonfield.
So that was not a personal dream for you?
Yes, it was.
Oh, it was.
It was right before.
It was right when your career
Where you
at the school system was going to end?
Yeah, you were like a year, 2 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I know what that feels like. It could have been a pride. Yeah, I mean, have I changed? I'm sure I have. I'm not necessarily the best judge of, how different one is, but I just remember the tree and thinking,
Wow.
and then there were other dreams, and I began to look at them together. And quite frankly, they were scary.
Wow.
Yeah.
And why it occurred and so forth. That's another matter, but that's not the important thing. It was okay, God, you're giving me this warning. What's up with that? Like, what do I? how do I avoid it? There wasn't a way. to
Yeah.
avoid it. It was just,
Found
part of-
no way to avoid it.
yeah, it was part of his plan, just like this was. part of
Well,
it.
So
maybe
Dara,
if
do
you
you
had been merciful to the oppressed at the time, it would have been delayed a little.
like the,
I hadn't thought of
Abby.
that.
Abby,
Dara, do you feel like you pay attention because like now more so to your dreams because you feel like that's almost like how God talks to you?
Sometimes he does.
I feel like that's your gift to the spirit. I
Yeah.
feel like he talks to you through dreams because you've always had dreams. Remember in Marlton, you used to have dreams when you were in that room at the end there of things floating above you and stuff.
Or the dream of Grandpa B calling me up on the telephone after he died and saying, repent, in that broken English that he used to say. And I'd say, but you're dead. How could you be calling me? Oh my gosh.
That was your
But it-
dream?
scary.
Wow. I didn't know you had
You know,
that.
it's so weird you said that. I was just thinking about you and Mom and how you guys used to always like, well, maybe
Talk about
not,
the
maybe
dreams. Yeah, they always talked
not
about the
just
dreams.
dreams, like weird spirit, not weird, but spirit things.
yeah,
I
we've
feel
seen
like
some
that-
weird stuff. I've seen weird stuff. Dara's seen weird stuff.
Yeah, like that.
I've had dreams, but not as many as Dara has.
I feel like that's his gift.
Not-
Well, it could be, it just every so often there's one, but that was a plain, then there was another one that, and I have 2.5 minutes left, but here was another quick one that was in that same time period. That was shocking. I was on 295 getting off at 38, heading towards like that Target right there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was traffic. I was with Tori and the traffic had come to a stop on the off ramp heading towards like that Martyr Avenue. And there was a flagpole, like you'd see in a schoolyard there. And there was a little ball on top. And Tori and I were standing there. It was right outside of, 10 feet, 15 feet away from our door. And a guy had climbed to the very top and was jumping off head first. And we watched him and he landed face first on the pavement. And we were like, and I could hear the thud. And it was so jarring to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. And I said to myself, what, should we help him? What's the matter with him? Well, the police were coming after him and he got right back up and climbed to the top of the pole and began the process of doing it again.
Oh my
And I,
God.
and I said, I'm out of here, Tor, let's get out of here. Because it was so scary.
Yeah.
And it was another thing of, yeah, this is coming your way, dude. I don't know how to sugarcoat it for you, but it was a representation of a school-based thing that didn't really make sense until later. But afterwards it was like, well, I guess it's merciful. You gave me a warning, but it's still scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Anytime like that, something like that happens, it's petrifying.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
But for you to just have dream after dream after dream for years in advance, that's just tough.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah,
Wow.
There's,
not bizarre, just because that's what you do. You have these dreams all the time. He
Mhm.
gives you
Yeah.
you dreams.
Dara, do you remember when
I'm gonna
you were
stop the
dating
recording.
Dusty?
I'm gonna stop recording this.
Oh, we only have 1 minute
We have
left.
less than a minute too.
Oh, okay, go ahead, real quick. That's right, we'll be cut off.
I was gonna say, do you remember when you were gonna ask Gusty to marry you and you were like, you had this dream? And you said, Deb, I had this dream. I don't know what it means. I don't remember what it was,
No.
but I was like, why is he asking me? I don't know what his dream means. And you asked me and I said,